Welcome back to a post-budget analysis. On the desk with me, Paul Theron, Director at Vestact, Mandy, Head of Tax Technical at PricewaterhouseCoopers, Kevin Lings, an economist at Stanlib, and Sheshi, Kaniki, Senior Economist at Momentum. Kyle, let's start with you. The incentives provided, were they sufficient? 20 billion rands for manufacturing and about 10 billion rands in support of the Industrial Policy Action Plan.
Yeah, it's difficult to say. There's very little detail provided, so we'll have to wait for that just to be able to comment any sort of detail on that in that respect. The 20 billion rand for the manufacturing is nothing new. That legislation has been in place for a couple of years already. There were regulations released last year, and it's up and running. So it was really clutching at straws in relation to that. Incidentally, the incentive might be 20 billion rand, but that's 20 billion rand in tax allowances. So effectively, it's only 28% of that.
Sheshi, your views on this one? We do know that, just to tie these two issues together, manufacturing has been identified as a distress sector in the economy. We know that through the Industrial Policy Action Plan, it's categorized as a sensitive area together with automotives, together with the textiles. So this 20 billion, just to support that? Or as Kyle is saying, it's nothing new, it's just an add-on?
Well, I think we need to do as much as possible to support manufacturing. And if we have 20 billion, whether it's something that's been there before and we are re-emphasizing it, that's fine. But clearly it's a sector that contributes in excess of 16% of our GDP. It's a sector that is highly biased towards exports, so opening up to international markets. So I would say, for me, it's not only that we need to link that 20 billion, but every other fund that the government may have, including the 9 billion, and any other potential source of capital. How can we link it to those distressed sectors, those labor-absorbing sectors that you've identified, including manufacturing?
He did say that we are likely to see export growth in the region of 6% or just over 6%. So we are beginning to see South Africa come back a little bit. And will this 20 billion just give us additional impetus?
It may do that to some extent, you could argue. And he did emphasize that South Africa's role as an emerging market and part of the BRIC summit in April, so you would argue that maybe there's some potential around that. I just feel that when I go back to the State of the Nation address, the President made a lot to do with the 39 billion that he said would be there to promote employment. Now it turns out it's not really. Most of that is really new, and we've only got most of it is old, 9 billion really as an employment fund. So my takeaway from that is that was a little bit deceptive. What is perhaps a little bit more encouraging in this budget is what you mentioned earlier on, the 10 billion that goes to Rob Davies's department as Minister of Trade and Industry. And clearly Rob Davies has an industrial development program in place. He's identified certain industries, and now he's got 10 billion to work with in order to promote those industries. Many of them will be in manufacturing, not all of them. There are some service industries. So there's a clear focus within the budget, I think, to try and encourage industry, to focus on private sector, to try and get the economy going. Again, all of these things, I think, are moving in the right direction. As I said earlier, I'd rather have them than not have them. But it's a question of, can we make these things work? Can they be implemented? Does private sector avail themselves of this? So it's crucial, absolutely crucial, in the next couple of weeks, that government puts out a lot of detail on how these programs work, and that they educate business as to how they get in touch with the programs and how they utilize them.
Firstly, Paul, a comment on the budget allocations to incentivize a bit more investment in key sectors like manufacturing, like tourism, like mining.
I can't be bothered to look at that detail. I must say it's too complicated and there are too many acronyms, so I'm going to ignore that stuff completely. I mean, the big picture about our economy and the way it works, you have to compare it to, say, what we discovered with Egypt. The government in Egypt makes all of its money from oil. Then they take it and they completely distort their economy by making bread cheap and giving people jobs in defunct departments. That doesn't happen in South Africa. In South Africa, we have a proper economy. Okay, we have some marginal benefits for certain kinds of companies, and I assume bigger companies take advantage of those because they have employees whose job it is to find out what the latest scheme is. So that's fine. The main thing about business in South Africa is it's still possible to go out and build a big business. And that's good news. You will be taxed as you go along the way, and government will keep out of your sector unless, of course, they've been in there forever.
I'm glad you mentioned this issue, because I said I'm asking you the question in two components. The question, though, when we start looking at labor absorptive export-oriented sectors is, are we competitive enough? Are we keeping on throwing money at a problem that we cannot fix? And some people are arguing, yeah, you know, manufacturing, that's not your competitive advantage.
That's
the Chinese do
definitely
it
the
better.
case.
Why are you bothering?
But unfortunately, the Minister of Economic Development is a former trade unionist who wants to defend the textile sector in Cape Town. It's a complete non-starter, but we're probably going to do it anyway.
Do you agree with that? Should we at least try somewhere?
I'd be a little kinder, because I think Rob Davies has had a look at industries across the board and tried to identify potential industries that can be successful. I agree with Paul in the sense that some of them are manufacturing and some of them we're just not naturally competitive at, and it's going to be difficult. But there are new industries that they're bringing into the fold, and maybe some of those will catch hold. It's the fact that we're struggling to identify where our competitive edge is doesn't mean we need to stop. We need to keep searching for what is it that we can maybe create in South Africa.
Yes, I mean, the East Asian countries did not have a competitive advantage in manufacturing 60 years ago. Today, through skills training, through education, through absorbing foreign technologies, they have managed to get to a place where they do. So I'm saying that it's probably a long, long road. The other thing is that we probably need to look at manufacturing as part of the overall value chain. So clearly where we could have a comparative advantage in agriculture, we've got land, we've got unskilled labor. So where can we tap into agriculture and then link that up to a manufacturing, perhaps not to the level that it is, but we do need a broad-based economy, and maybe manufacturing.
I mean, the minister did make a lot of reference to supporting the small farmer. He's also introduced the Kula Enterprise Fund and some money towards small SME support, 55 million rands, 600 million towards enterprise investments, 282 million towards micro financing funds. Are those going to help?
Not enough. You see, when you end in all of those statements with millions and not billions, and therein lies the problem. So it is allocations to these areas. And as I said, I think the minister is acknowledging the importance of small business, and we keep acknowledging it, but we're not doing a hell of a lot about it. There's not a major effort to encourage entrepreneurship, to encourage the development of small business. And that is probably where the employment can come from more realistically. So I think he could have done more.
I'd agree with that point. If you look at those sort of incentives that have been announced, the really big ones are aimed at large business. Again, they come back to the manufacturing incentive. It's aimed at new projects above 200 million rand in cost. I mean, those projects don't create the sort of jobs that small projects do in terms of jobs created per rand spent, if you like.
Let's talk about the national health insurance. And he did introduce some sort of a precursor by financing a family healthcare program, and reiterates that the health insurance is still in design, but this should give them some sort of a building block.
He's saying that it's a 14-year program, and I think we've got to keep that in mind. So this is a long process to ramp up to a more comprehensive national health insurance. So in its design, it will have that in nature, and obviously he's got to start now. And he has introduced some elements, but clearly the big elements and the costly elements are going to be in the future. And I find it's important that he's starting to talk or soften up the public as to where the money is going to come from for that national health insurance. There's no doubt in the current budget framework, we don't have the money to fund it. We would have to extend something like VAT or a payroll tax. So we're going to need more taxes to fund this.
Yes, I like his approach of taking it as a step-by-step process. He's said things today that look to build our infrastructure, look to build our capacity for the future. He's got values in there that are not millions, billions, but they're small billions. And hopefully that begins to set a foundation for what we're looking to do in the future.
Should we be worried? I mean, to fund the national health insurance, Paul, we might see VAT increased, payroll taxes being introduced, those sorts of things.
Yeah, we should be worried, because if we want to have first world health standards, we need a first world economy to support it and pay for it. And at the moment we don't. We have people who are rich, who are able to afford discovery, who can go to the best hospitals on the planet. And then we have countless millions of people who get terrible care in terrible facilities despite best efforts of certain people. So it's a big jump from the one to the other. I think there is some work that can be done, but maybe we ought not to be too optimistic. We have to cut our suit according to our cloth.
Well, again, there's no detail in the budget on this. It's worth bearing in mind that the statements that have been made are essentially just the same statements that were made in the ANC discussion paper that came out. So I think the one thing to take out of this now, it has effectively become government policy rather than ANC policy. We'll wait and see what comes out in the discussion paper, which is supposed to be due out later this month.
Okay. In 3 sentences, post-budget, are you impressed?
The only thing that worries me is Lindiwe Sisulu's allocation is very small, and my concern is if we get invaded by Zimbabwe or Mozambique, we're likely to be nearly defenseless.
If I can just talk from a tax perspective for the moment, I think very much like last year, it was a holding budget. So most taxpayers will be relieved more than anything else.
Right.
I liked what the guy from Standard & Poor's said. He talked about it being a sobering budget, and on reflection, I'd agree with that. It's kind of more the reality of where South Africa is at, and we've got a lot of demands in terms of expenditure and a limited tax base ultimately.
I like the fact that the budget has come in an environment where the economy is growing. We have much to look forward to in the year ahead. The emphasis on job creation, absolutely spot on. I like the fact, as Kevin said earlier on, that we're starting to say small businesses are what can unlock employment in this country, but more needs to be done in that area.
All right. Sheshi, Kaniki, Kevin Lings, Mandy, Paul Theron, thank you for your time.